Not far away, Solara staggered, gripping her skull as if trying to claw the voice from her mind. A vision invaded her, a fabricated memory, cruel and vivid. She saw Jonas, clad in blood-stained armor, standing over the lifeless bodies of her family, her father, her mother, her brothers, slaughtered by his hand.
"He is your enemy!"
The voice cooed, sweet as poisoned honey. Solara's grip on her blade tightened. Her breath hitched, fury boiling in her veins.
"You killed them!"
She hissed, but deep within her, a single doubt flickered, a whisper of reason. Jonas met her gaze, his voice steady despite the storm raging around them.
"That's not real. Don't let it control you."
Welcome to the Vault of Tales, a treasure trove of science fiction stories. Today, we embark on the journey of a battle-hardened human soldier and a stunning alien warrior in the story, the Dead Planet's Secret. Trapped on the ravaged world of Cynus 9, they must unite against a cosmic horror from an ancient civilization that created them both, sacrificing their memories to stop its awakening, only to face an ending that questions reality itself. Let's get started. On Cynus 9, a world once a beacon of human ambition, now nothing more than a graveyard, Jonas Reed woke to a nightmare. The roar of electromagnetic storms shook the skies, tearing through the darkness with jagged streaks of electric blue lightning, each strike carved into the ground like the blade of an unseen giant, scorching the earth and sending waves of radioactive dust spiraling into the air. The crimson haze painted jagged streaks across the cracked terrain, a landscape of death and ruin. Jonas lay amidst the wreckage, his breath harsh and uneven through the crackling audio feed of his survival filter. His exosuit, once an advanced war machine, now sputtered and whined, its systems faltering like the failing heartbeat of a dying soldier. Around him, the shattered remains of the Aurora Dawn, a once proud warship of the Human Alliance fleet, had been reduced to smoldering debris. Twisted metal curled like broken ribs, the last remnants of a battle lost. Jonas Reed, a seasoned operative of the Planetary Guard, was no stranger to war. Beneath the tinted visor of his helmet, his face bore the scars of countless battles against the Valkyrie, a ruthless alien race that had driven humanity to the fringes of the stars. But this time, something was different. His comms were silent, no desperate distress signals blinked on his HUD, only the eerie stillness remained, a silence far more terrifying than the screams of battle. With a grunt, Jonas pushed himself upright, fingers tightening around the hilt of a worn combat knife, his father's legacy. A relic from the first human pioneers who had ventured beyond Sol. Its blade bore a faded engraving, "We shape the stars," a creed of resilience, a reminder that humanity was not meant to be prey. The poisoned air of Cynus 9 would melt the lungs of any unprotected being. Jonas checked his suit's filtration system, 47% capacity, enough for a few more hours, provided he didn't have to run. But run from what? His eyes scanned the battlefield, the scattered remains of his squad, fragments of armor, splattered with dried blood, but no bodies, as if they had been erased from existence. A shadow moved through the thick radiation fog, swift, predatory. Jonas froze, his grip tightened on the knife. Whatever it was, it wasn't human. From the crimson mist, Solara Varus emerged. Her violet eyes glowed like twin embers. Cutting through the haze, a blade sworn, one of the Valkyrie elite. Bio-engineered perfection, bred for war, her armor was no mere plating but a living, pulsating second skin, organic metal fused with alien musculature, glowing with soft violet veins of energy. In her grasp, a wickedly curved blade shimmered, a weapon not forged, but grown, carved from the bones of her ancestors. It pulsed with a low hum, thirsting for blood. Solara tilted her head, studying Jonas like a predator analyzing its prey. When she spoke, her voice carried through a neural translator, sharp as the edge of her weapon. "Human, you still breathe. How unfortunate." Jonas didn't respond. He launched forward, moving with the speed of a warrior who had spent a lifetime fighting monsters. His knife clashed against her blade, sparks erupted, illuminating the deadly dance of two sworn enemies. Jonas fought with raw, unforgiving brutality, each strike fueled by the ghosts of his fallen comrades. Solara countered with chilling precision, her blade whispering through the air in elegant arcs, leaving streaks of violet luminescence in its wake. Above them, the storm howled, as if the planet itself was watching. Then, before either blade could find its mark, a deafening explosion shattered the moment. Both warriors turned as hover drones descended from the storm-ridden sky, their engines howling like mechanical predators. Plasma fire rained down, tearing into the ground mere meters away. Human mercenaries, scavengers, traders, those who had abandoned the Alliance, hunting Vel-carried tech for the highest bidder. Jonas exhaled sharply. "I'd rather die than trust you." Solara's expression didn't change. "Try, human, but do not drag me with you." Yet, as the crimson sky burned and the drones circled like vultures, both knew the truth. Survival demanded an alliance neither desired. Jonas kept his knife ready. Solara lowered her blade, though her violet eyes still burned with caution. In the heart of this storm, surrounded by death and betrayal, an unthinkable truce was born. The roar of hover drones still echoed behind them, mingling with the thunderous blasts of plasma rounds striking the ground as Jonas and Solara plunged into the magnetic storm. Each step kicked up radioactive dust, painting the air in a crimson haze. Visibility was near zero, but the cutting beams of the drone's searchlights slashed through the swirling smoke like the sides of death. Jonas, his augmented legs propelling him forward with brutal efficiency, led the way, his combat knife catching flickers of electric blue from the lightning overhead. Solara followed closely, her movements ghost-like, eerily fluid. Her living blade vibrated at a low frequency, almost as if it could sense the danger looming ever closer. They did not speak. Words were meaningless when survival hinged on instinct. Then, without warning, the ground beneath them trembled. A sickening crack split the air. Before Jonas could react, the rocky terrain collapsed, swallowing them into darkness. For a moment, there was only freefall, the rush of wind, the sensation of weightlessness. Then came impact. Jonas activated his shock absorbers mid-air, rolling with the force of the landing. Solara landed with an effortless precision, her blade embedded in the stone to slow her descent. As the dust settled, the dim glow of Jonas's visor illuminated their surroundings. They had fallen into a vast underground network, an ancient labyrinth of tunnels carved from stone, its walls covered in alien markings. The strange symbols pulsed faintly, coursing with a soft violet glow, like veins carrying an unseen lifeblood. Jonas narrowed his eyes. "What the hell is this?" Solara stepped forward, her luminous eyes scanning the chamber with the predatory focus of her kind. "Not ours," she muttered, her voice edged with suspicion. "And certainly not the work of you fragile humans." Jonas almost shot back a retort but froze as something further down the tunnel caught his eye. A massive structure loomed ahead, not a ship, not a building, but something alive. Its surface was organic, shifting subtly as if breathing, threaded with the same bioluminescent veins that pulsed across the walls. It gave off no sound, except for the whispering, a chorus of voices, layered upon each other, drifting through the cavern, incomprehensible, unsettling, like the murmurs of forgotten things clawing their way back into reality. Jonas felt the hairs on his arms rise. He didn't believe in ghosts, but whatever this was, it wasn't natural. His grip tightened around his knife. Solara moved first, drawn forward by something unseen. As her fingers brushed the surface of the living structure, a pulse of energy surged through her body. Then she saw it. A vision, fleeting, yet terrifying. A woman, faceless yet imposing, standing in an endless white void. Chains of radiant light bound her hands, their glow searing against the nothingness of her form. She had no features, yet power radiated from her in waves. Something primordial, something wrong. Solara wrenched her hand away. Staggering back, Jonas watched her reaction carefully. "What did you see?" She didn't answer at first. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Something that shouldn't exist. Jonas knelt, scanning a fragment of debris near his feet. As his visor's glow traced over its surface, his breath caught in his throat. His knife, the same one passed down from his father, bore an inscription. A circle with 3 horizontal slashes through its center. And that same symbol was carved into the walls around them. That shouldn't be possible. His father had never set foot on Cynus 9. Had he? Before he could process the implications, a deafening explosion shattered the stillness above. The mercenaries had found a way in. Drone lights cut into the cavern. Searching, hunting. Jonas turned to Solara. Their eyes met, his, sharp and unyielding, hers, calculating, wary. If we want to live, we move forward, he said. She hesitated only for a fraction of a second before nodding. Behind them, the mercenaries closed in. Ahead, the whispers from the living machine grew louder, their eerie symphony echoing through the cavern. Together, they stepped deeper into the darkness of Cynus 9, where secrets long buried awaited, secrets that might decide the fate of both their species. The darkness of the underground tunnels swallowed Jonas and Solara as they pressed forward, leaving the roar of hover drones and mercenaries behind. The dim glow from Jonas's HUD flickered across the walls, illuminating cryptic violet sigils that pulsed faintly, like veins of some ancient, slumbering beast. Every footstep echoed through the cold, empty space, a whispering reminder that they did not belong here. The murmurs from the colossal machine still lingered in their minds, elusive yet persistent, an invitation or warning. Jonas tightened his grip on his knife, his gaze sharp as it swept through the shadows. Beside him, Solara moved with silent precision, her bioblade humming at a low frequency, as if sensing the unseen presence that loomed in the air. After several minutes of careful movement, they came upon a structure buried in the darkness, an abandoned Valkyrie outpost. Long consumed by time and decay, twisted remains of organic plating lay scattered across the chamber, some still fused to the bodies of fallen Valkyrie warriors. Jonas stepped forward, his exosuit's servos whining softly against the stone. The light from his HUD flickered over the lifeless forms, withered flesh clung to brittle bones, their eyes hollow voids of black stone, stripped of the signature violet glow of their kind. What the hell happened here? Jonas muttered, his fingers tightening around his blade. He had seen Valkyrie slaughter humans before, but this was different. No wounds, no blood, only the eerie stillness of death. Solara knelt beside one of the corpses, running her fingers over the petrified armor. This was not done by human hands, she said, voice steady but laced with something almost imperceptible, wariness. Something drained them. Jonas scoffed, about to throw a sarcastic remark, but then he noticed something, a small device lying amidst the wreckage. A Valkyrie data recorder, cracked but still pulsing with weak energy. He crouched, linking it to his exosuit's interface. His HUD flickered, and a distorted video feed appeared. The footage was grainy but clear enough. A Valkyrie soldier stood in the very same outpost, his violet eyes suddenly flickering, then darkening. His body trembled violently, as though something inside him was unraveling. Then, without warning, an invisible shockwave erupted from him, rippling outward. Every Valkyrie around him collapsed instantly, their bodies shriveling in mere seconds. Drained of all essence, the soldier himself barely had time to scream before his own form disintegrated into nothingness. The screen went black, silence, then, a whisper. Faint at first, but layered, thousands of voices speaking as one, both eerily melodic and grotesquely distorted, a lullaby and a death knell. Jonas flinched, his HUD momentarily glitching, and in that brief distortion, he saw something. Himself, standing in this very place, wearing a different suit, holding something that pulsed with unnatural light. But the memory did not belong to him. "You've been here before," Solara murmured, her violet gaze locking onto his with suspicion. "I can feel it." Jonas shook his head, his voice firm. "Don't start with your Valkyrie mysticism. I've never set foot in this damn place. But even as he said it, doubt crept in, the symbols on the knife, the familiar layout of the outpost, the image that had flickered across his HUD. Solara stood, gripping her bio-blade as its resonance deepened. You can lie to yourself, human, but the darkness here does not lie. The whispering grew louder, seeping into their minds like an icy current. Jonas's heart pounded, though his exosuit registered no anomalies. He turned his attention back to the corpses, his expression hardening. Whatever did this, it's still here. His voice was low, controlled, and if we're not careful, we'll be next. For once, Solara did not argue. Neither of them knew that. Deep within the shadows of Cynus 9, the thing that had erased this outpost was watching, waiting for its moment to strike. Jonas and Solara moved forward, their steps slow and deliberate as the whispers of Cynus 9 coiled around them like a living presence. The air itself felt charged, heavy with something unseen, something ancient. Their departure from the abandoned Valkyrie base had done little to ease the unease settling in their bones. If anything, the silence between them only served to amplify the weight of what they had witnessed. Jonas kept his pace steady, the servos in his exosuit humming softly with each movement. The dim glow of his HUD played across the desiccated corpses they left behind, grim reminders of a threat neither of them could yet comprehend. Solara walked slightly behind, her bio-blade still humming faintly in her grip. Her violet eyes scanned the shadows with a quiet intensity, her instincts honed by years of battle. Then, she froze, a shudder ran through her body, sudden and violent, as if an unseen force had gripped her spine. Her knees buckled, sending her to the cold ground. The bio-blade slipped from her fingers, clattering against the stone in a metallic chime that echoed eerily through the tunnel. Jonas spun around, his blade instinctively ready. What the hell's wrong with you? His voice was tense, edged with suspicion. Solara didn't answer, not at first. Her wide, unfocused eyes stared into nothingness, locked onto something beyond the veil of the present. Images flooded her mind, memories that weren't hers. A battlefield, foreign, unfamiliar. The sky burned red, streaked with plasma fire. And beside her, Jonas, but not as he was now. He wore a different suit, moved with a different presence. His face was hardened, his gaze filled with a silent resolve she had never seen before. She called out to him in that vision, but he didn't turn, didn't seem to recognize her at all. Then, just as quickly as it had come, the vision shattered. She gasped, her breath ragged, cold sweat clinging to her skin. Jonas crouched in front of her, his blade still in hand. What did you see? His tone was steady, but there was something else beneath it, something just shy of fear. Solara looked up at him, her expression unreadable. You and me, in a place that shouldn't exist. Jonas's jaw tightened. He opened his mouth, about to argue, but before he could, a faint glow flickered at the edge of his vision. At the far end of the tunnel stood a colossal door, at least 10 meters high. Its surface was etched with intricate, swirling patterns, glowing with a dim violet light, the same light that pulsed along the symbols on Jonas's blade. He stepped forward, his fingers brushing the weapon at his side. A cold sensation seeped into his skin from the metal, a whisper of recognition echoing in his thoughts. Again with this, he muttered under his breath. The unease that had been lurking beneath his skin now curled into something closer to dread. Solara rose to her feet, her gaze locked onto the massive structure. When she reached out, her gloved hand pressing against its surface. The moment her fingers made contact, everything changed. A pulse of energy erupted from the door, a shockwave that sent both of them stumbling backward. And then, visions. Jonas found himself somewhere else, no longer in the tunnel, no longer anywhere he recognized. He was aboard a vessel, but not Aurora Dawn. This place was alive, its walls pulsed and stretched like breathing flesh, their surfaces glistening with some unnatural sheen. Around him, twisted creatures shrieked, half machine, half organic nightmares, their bodies writhing as they reached for him with metallic tendrils. He raised his arms, ready to fight, but there was no weapon in his hands. Only his voice, only the fire of defiance in his mind. "We do not surrender." The words rang through his skull. A battle cry not just of one man, but of something greater. At the same time, Solara saw something else. A tower, impossibly tall, stretching beyond the limits of her vision. It stood alone in a sea of blinding white light, enchanted, a presence, a vast, unknowable entity bound by luminous strands of energy. Writhing against its restraints, it turned its gaze upon her. Not with eyes, there were no eyes. But she felt it, and when it spoke, the words were not words at all, but a pulse of pure sound, vibrating through the marrow of her bones. The visions shattered, both of them were thrown back into reality, their bodies hitting the cold stone floor. Their breaths came in harsh, uneven gasps. The massive door before them, once sealed, was now open, its edges crackling with residual energy, releasing a deep, mechanical groan. Beyond it, a city, vast, sprawling, ancient. Twisting towers, alien in design, stretched toward the cavernous void above. Their surfaces were laced with glowing veins of violet energy. Statues lined the streets, human-like. But, wrong, they weren't made of stone. They were something else, frozen mid-motion, their forms locked in expressions of terror, as if captured in their final moments. Some of them whispered, faint, broken voices, barely more than echoes from a time long lost. Jonas exhaled sharply, gripping his blade. This place, he shook his head, it's not meant for the living. And at the city's heart, a structure, floating, suspended within its core, was a translucent sarcophagus. Inside it, a woman. Her face was smooth, featureless, no eyes, no mouth, only an empty, almost perfect reflection of the world around her. But as Solara's gaze fell upon her, something twisted inside her chest. Because somehow, impossibly, the shape, the presence, the very essence of this figure, looked just like her. Jonas noticed her expression, his voice low. "You know her." Solara shook her head, but the doubt in her eyes betrayed the answer. And in the distance, the whispers grew louder, calling them closer. The whispers from the transparent coffin echoed through Jonas and Solara's minds, pulling them closer to the heart of the colossal underground city. Jonas moved with the measured caution of a seasoned warrior, his knife glinting under the faint violet glow of the pulsing energy veins that spread like roots through the ancient ruins. Solara, still unsettled by the eerie resemblance between herself and the faceless woman within, kept her bio-blade primed, its resonance humming in sync with the strange rhythm of this place. This city was no mere remnant of the past, it was alive. The walls trembled as though responding to a distant heartbeat. The luminous veins flickered like blood coursing through an ancient, slumbering beast. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of burnt metal and something far older, something beyond human or Velcari comprehension. Jonas stopped in front of the floating coffin, the HUD from his exosuit casting a distorted reflection over its glass-like surface. He could feel something radiating from within, not technology, but something raw, something alive. "Who is she?" he asked, his voice low, edged with suspicion, as he turned to Solara. She didn't answer. Her violet eyes were locked onto the faceless figure, an unexplainable connection tethering her to whatever lay inside. Then, a crack, a fracture raced across the coffin's surface, branching like lightning. In the span of a breath, the entire structure shattered. Shards of translucent material hung momentarily in the air, suspended in defiance of gravity, and the woman opened her eyes. They weren't eyes, not truly, just two blazing voids of pure light, and as that light erupted, the world around them shuddered. Jonas staggered back, his knife raised instinctively, but he didn't strike. Solara remained still, her bio-blade vibrating violently in response to the energy now spilling into the chamber. The light did not merely illuminate, it consumed. Thousands of images flooded their minds, raw and unrelenting, visions of collapsing civilizations, star-faring empires reduced to cinders, Entire fleets torn asunder by an unfathomable darkness. Solara saw planets cracking apart, oceans evaporating into oblivion, beings unknown to both man and Valkyrie writhing in anguish. Each vision was a fragment of destruction spanning countless millennia, a warning carved into the fabric of time itself. Yet the woman did not attack. She drifted weightlessly, held aloft by unseen forces, and a silent pulse of energy wove fragmented memories into their consciousness. Jonas clenched his jaw, resisting the invasion. He saw Cynus 9, not as a decayed graveyard, but as it once was, a radiant bastion of an unknown civilization. Its towers piercing the heavens, its living machines towering over its inhabitants. Solara saw horrors lurking beneath the grandeur, experiments beyond morality. Human and Valkyrie alike bred within artificial wombs, their fates entwined by the hands of unseen architects. She saw war, not born from their species' hatred, but orchestrated, a grand illusion cast by those who had always stood in the shadows. And at the end of it all, something chained, something vast and enraged, its presence confined within an abyss darker than the void itself. Then the woman spoke, not through sound, but directly into their minds. Her voice was low, cold, yet burdened with the weight of eons. Cynus 9 was the final battlefield. She whispered, a third force has manipulated both your kind and hers. They waged war through your blood, through your deaths, feeding something that still lingers here. Jonas's grip on his knife tightened. What is it? He demanded. The woman tilted her head, her glowing gaze locking onto him. It still lives, and it is calling. The whispers of the living city grew louder, merging with her voice, forming a chorus of forgotten souls. The biomechanical statues around them trembled, their hushed murmurs sharpening into something more, not pleas for salvation, but warnings of what lay ahead. Jonas turned to Solara, his expression hard as steel. Whatever it is, we don't let it win. For the first time, she nodded without hesitation. There was no hostility in her gaze, only grim understanding. In the depths of Cynus 9, beneath the weight of countless forgotten histories, two former enemies now stood at the precipice of fate, and beyond them, something ancient stirred. The underground city beneath Cynus 9 trembled violently, as if it were breathing in response to the faceless woman's whispers. Jonas Reed held his ground, his combat knife glinting under the dim violet glow of the energy veins that pulsed across the ancient ruins. His gaze was sharp, unwavering, the unbreakable resolve of humanity reflected in his eyes. Beside him, Solara Varus gripped her bioblade tightly, its resonance matching the frantic rhythm of her heart. Her glowing violet eyes flickered with turmoil as the weight of the revelation settled upon her. The faceless woman hovered before them, her glowing white eyes piercing through the darkness, her voice whispering into their minds like an ancient curse. The master of this place still lives, and it is calling. She tilted her head, her weightless form drifting through the air, and continued weaving fragments of the past into their consciousness. The third civilization created you, she intoned, her voice colder than the void. Humans in Valkyrie, experiments born from the ashes of dying stars. Programmed for conflict, for bloodshed, your wars were never your own. They were a catalyst to awaken our master from its slumber. Jonas clenched his jaw, his grip on the knife tightening until his knuckles turned white. An experiment, he spat, fury seething in his voice. We are no one's puppets. The fire of humanity burned in him, unyielding, defiant. He refused to accept a fate dictated by unseen hands. Solara said nothing, but pain flickered across her features. She had always believed the Valkyrie to be a noble race, superior in mind and purpose, not tools, not pawns in a game played by an ancient manipulator. The faceless woman regarded them with unreadable eyes. I am the last messenger, she murmured, left behind to warn those who remain. But you are too late. Before she could utter another word, an explosion thundered through the entrance to the city. The walls trembled, dust cascading from above. A squad of human mercenaries stormed in. their hover drones shrieking through the air, scanning the ruins with cold efficiency. In their hands, Vel carry hybrid weapons, sleek rifles that spat out a corrosive, pale violet liquid capable of disintegrating anything it touched. They weren't here to rescue anyone. They had come to claim whatever power was radiating from this living city. "Take them down," one of the soldiers barked, his voice distorted through a respirator mask. Jonas reacted first. His exosuit surged with power, propelling him forward like a bullet. His knife found flesh, then steel. Sparks flew as he clashed with an armored mercenary, his blade slicing through the weak points in the plating. Solara leapt high, her bioblade a streak of white-hot light as it cleaved through a drone midair. The machine shattered, its remains plummeting like burning meteors. They fought like a single force, reluctant allies, but lethal together. The battlefield pulsed with the rhythm of their movements, an unspoken synchronization born not of trust, but necessity. And then, amidst the chaos, a new voice slithered into Jonas's mind. Deep, seductive, it was not the faceless woman. "Release me," it whispered. "If you do, humanity will rise. The Vel-Carry will kneel before you. The universe will be yours." Jonas faltered. A vision crashed into him like a tidal wave, massive human fleets shattering the skies. Vel-Carry worlds burning, entire civilizations bending the knee before the might of mankind. He clenched his teeth, shaking his head violently. "Get out of my head," he roared. Not far away, Solara staggered, gripping her skull as if trying to claw the voice from her mind. A vision invaded her, a fabricated memory. Cruel and vivid, she saw Jonas, clad in blood-stained armor, standing over the lifeless bodies of her family. Her father, her mother, her brothers, slaughtered by his hand. "He is your enemy," the voice cooed, sweet as poisoned honey. Solara's grip on her blade tightened. Her breath hitched, fury boiling in her veins. "You killed them," she hissed, but deep within her, a single doubt flickered, a whisper of reason. Jonas met her gaze, his voice steady despite the storm raging around them. "That's not real. Don't let it control you." The mercenaries seized their moment. They closed in, weapons raised, corrosive ammunition primed to fire. Above them, the faceless woman hovered, silent and unmoving. She did not intervene. She merely watched, as though she had seen this all before, as though she knew how it would end. The underground city of Cynus 9 trembled under the roar of battle. As Jonas and Solara found themselves encircled by mercenaries, trapped between the living walls in the pulsing veins of violet energy. Biocorrosive rounds spewed from their weapons, leaving trails of toxic smoke as they melted into the stone floor. Above, hover drones circled like metallic vultures, their red scanning beams slicing through the gloom. Jonas, his exosuit straining under the pressure, drove his father's combat knife into the nearest soldier, sparks erupting as steel met reinforced plating. Solara moved like a spectral blade, her biotic sword a streak of violet light as she cleaved through a drone mid-flight. And yet, even as she fought, uncertainty flickered in her eyes, an echo of the fabricated memory that whispered of Jonas slaughtering her family. Then, reality fractured. The space before them cracked like a shattered mirror, shards of existence peeling away to reveal another entity, not the faceless woman from before, but something older, something greater, towering and formless. It radiated authority, its eyes twin infernos of white fire. The city's walls quivered at its presence, bio-sculpted statues rupturing under the pressure of its very existence. Its voice slithered through the battlefield, no longer a whisper, but a declaration laced with an undeniable, intoxicating promise. "I am the architect of your fate. Release me, and I will grant you power beyond the dreams of your kind." Before Jonas's eyes, a vision unfurled, a war-ravaged Vel-Carry world reduced to smoldering ash. The sky choked with the fleet of the human alliance. Humanity, ascendant, supreme. Solara saw her own victory. An unstoppable Vel-Carry war-host under her command, avenging the betrayal of her people. Jonas gritted his teeth, the fire of his kind, unyielding, defiant, blazing within him. He took a step forward, his knife gleaming in the eerie glow, the very embodiment of human resolve. "We don't take shortcuts," he growled, voice cutting through the cacophony of war. "We build our own future, brick by bloody brick." The entity cocked its head, its burning gaze narrowing, assessing him, but before it could respond, Solara cried out, clutching her head. The false memory of Jonas slaughtering her family surged within her, drowning her thoughts in rage and grief. Yet, something resisted, through the storm of deception. She whispered an ancient Valkyrie mantra, a rhythmic chant. Fluid as flowing water, it anchored her, guiding her toward clarity. And then, another memory surfaced. A buried truth. She saw herself within a genetic chamber. Her DNA a fusion of two bloodlines, human and Valkyrie intertwined. Her breath caught. "I am a hybrid," she murmured, eyes locking onto Jonas. "That's why I can feel you." The illusion fractured, but the battle was far from over. Some of the mercenaries had already begun to change, blackened tendrils of metal spiraling from their flesh. Their eyes aglow with violet light. They were no longer soldiers, they were extensions of the entity's will. Jonas's mind worked fast. He knelt, retrieving a shattered drone from the wreckage. His eyes flicked to Solara. "Help me," he said, an order, not a request. For the first time, she didn't hesitate. She ripped the biotic core from a downed drone, tossing it to him. Jonas didn't understand Valkyrie technology, but he didn't need to. Humanity had never needed permission to innovate. With swift, precise movements, he spliced it into the circuitry of his exosuit, jury-rigging a crude but deadly weapon, an EMP detonator. "Behind me," he commanded. Solara obeyed. Jonas triggered the device. A silent wave of energy exploded outward. The mutated mercenaries convulsed, their corrupted bodies seizing before collapsing, their glowing eyes flickering into nothingness. Above, the hover drones spiraled out of control, crashing into the ruins in bursts of flame and shrapnel. Jonas exhaled, his exosuit flashing warning signals, systems failing, integrity compromised, but he remained standing. Solara watched him, something shifting in her expression. The hostility, the wariness, it was still there, but now tempered with something else. "Respect, you humans," she murmured. "You are not simple." The faceless entity did not reappear, but its whispers lingered, a spectral promise of the battle yet to come. Jonas and Solara stood amid the ruins, bound by a terrifying truth and the undeniable power of an unlikely alliance. Whatever awaited them in the darkness of Cynus 9, they would face it together. The underground city of Cynus 9 lay in ruins, shrouded in smoke and the remnants of battle. Hover drone wreckage and the twisted bodies of the mercenaries, now little more than grotesque husks, were scattered across the cracked stone. Jonas Reed stood amidst the destruction, his exosuit flickering red with critical damage warnings, his breath ragged through the survival filter. Beside him, Solara Varus retracted her bioblade, her violet eyes gleaming with a newfound respect for the human who, just moments ago, had been nothing more than an enemy. Yet the whispers remained, fainter, but still lingering, like the dying embers of a fire refusing to be snuffed out. They both knew the fight was far from over. Jonas scanned the living city, his HUD illuminating an anomalous structure at its core, a towering console, pulsing with thin veins of violet energy that snaked across its surface like the arteries of some ancient being. Steeling himself, he reached out, pressing a gloved hand against the cold, metallic interface. Holographic symbols flared to life, the glowing inscriptions eerily matching the engravings on his father's blade. "Self-annihilation protocol," he muttered. Solara stepped closer, her gaze narrowing as she read the text, not in Valkyrie, not in any known human language, but something far older. "It will destroy everything," she said, her voice low. "But there's a cost." Jonas frowned. A new warning flickered on the hologram. Cognitive erasure imminent. A price to be paid. Memories sacrificed in exchange for ensuring the entity never fully awakens. His grip tightened. He turned to Solara, his expression unwavering but edged with uncertainty. "We don't have a choice," he said. "If that thing gets out, it won't just be us. It'll be the end of everything." Solara hesitated, her fingers flexing around the hilt of her bioblade, as if clinging to something slipping through her grasp. Then, she exhaled, nodding. Together, they pressed their hands against the interface. For a fleeting moment, their fingers brushed, an unspoken truce sealed in the face of oblivion. A deep, guttural hum resonated through the city. The walls, once shifting, breathing, began to shatter. Veins of violet energy erupted into violent arcs of electricity, consuming everything in their wake. "Move," Jonas bellowed, grabbing Solara as they sprinted toward the exit. The city convulsed around them, corridors collapsing in a cacophony of metal groans and shrieking stone. The very essence of the place, part machine, part living entity, was unraveling. And deep within, a final, furious roar echoed, the dying breath of something ancient and enraged. The corrupted mercenaries, their bodies now twisted with biomechanical tendrils, eyes glowing with violet malevolence, lurched toward them in desperation. But before they could reach their prey, the walls caved in, swallowing them in a maelstrom of stone and energy. Jonas and Solara dove through the last crumbling passageway, landing hard on the barren surface of Cynus 9 just as the final explosion ripped through the underground. Sending a shockwave across the wasteland, dust and irradiated debris billowed into the sky, painting the horizon in hues of crimson and ash. For a long moment, there was only silence. Jonas lay on the ground, chest rising and falling, his exosuit sputtering before going completely dark. The electromagnetic storm still raged above them, but the whispers, those cursed, insidious murmurs, were gone. He pushed himself upright, instinctively reaching for the knife strapped to his side, and hesitated. "Why'd I have this?" he murmured. The weight in his hand was familiar, yet foreign. The engravings on the blade, the ones he had known since childhood, meant nothing to him now. The memory of why it mattered had been erased. Solara's breath hitched. She stared at her own weapon, a distant, haunted look in her eyes. "My family," she whispered. Who were they? The truth had been purged from their minds. The knowledge they had fought so hard to protect, of the third civilization, of the entity's true nature, was gone. All that remained was a hollow ache, an absence neither of them could fully understand. Jonas exhaled, standing slowly, his gaze swept over the ruins, his jaw tightening. "No matter what we lost, we stopped it," he said, his voice low, resolute, a declaration not just to himself, but to the universe. Solara met his gaze. For once, she didn't argue. Whatever horror had lurked in the depths of Cynus 9 was now buried. Yet, as they turned away from the wreckage and stepped forward into the storm, something still watched from the shadows. The crimson radioactive dust slowly settled beneath Jonas Reed and Solara Varus as they left behind the ruins of the underground city. Trudging forward under the howling electromagnetic storm raging across the skies of Cynus 9. Jonas's exosuit crackled, red warning lights flashing across his HUD, signaling critical power loss. The cracks in his armor, battle scars from the brutal fight, exposed frayed circuits beneath. He staggered forward, his left hand clutching a bleeding wound in his side, each breath rasping through a failing respirator. Solara fared little better, though unburdened by mechanical armor. Her organic battlesuit was torn at the shoulder, streaks of pale violet blood trailing down her arm. Yet, even through her exhaustion, she still gripped her bioblade tightly, her glowing amethyst eyes burning with unyielding determination. Neither of them spoke. There was only the wind and eerie, wailing specter that swirled around them, and the crackle of green lightning splitting the turbulent sky. Hours passed as they pushed through the irradiated wasteland, their destination looming ahead, a forward supply station of the human coalition. The outpost was a lone bastion in the desolation, its automated turrets scanning the perimeter while transport ships idled on the landing platforms. Waiting for orders, Jonas pushed open the reinforced doors, his weary gaze sweeping across the personnel inside. "This is Cynus 9, reporting in," he rasped, voice rough with fatigue. A young officer turned, his face still holding the softness of inexperience beneath the shadow of his helmet. He frowned. "Cynus 9? A pause. Then, "Sir, there's no record of a Cynus 9. Are you sure you don't mean Cygnus 7? Jonas froze. His fingers twitched toward the knife at his belt, a blade that should have meant something. Should have carried weight, but now felt like nothing more than cold steel. Slowly, he turned to Solara. Their eyes met, and she gave a barely perceptible shake of her head, as if sensing the same wrongness creeping through the air. They demanded access to the station's records. The results were the same, empty. No battle reports, no mission logs, no mention of Cynus 9, no trace of the Aurora Dawn or the squadmates Jonas had fought alongside. It was as if none of it had ever existed. A technician examined the damage to Jonas's exosuit, muttering under his breath, "These fractures don't match anything from recent operations." Meanwhile, Solara stood apart, her presence an anomaly. The soldiers eyed her with suspicion. A Valkyrie within a human outpost, an impossible sight. And yet, no one questioned her. No one demanded an explanation. It was as if her existence here was an unspoken certainty. Jonas exhaled, his voice barely above a whisper. "Did we even live through it?" Solara didn't answer right away. Instead, she turned her gaze toward the storm raging outside, where ribbons of lightning wove through the clouds like veins of some great, unseen entity. "I don't know," she admitted at last, "but I can still feel it." As they left the command room, something small slipped from Jonas's gear and tumbled onto the floor, a fragment of the living machine from the underground ruins. No larger than a clenched fist, it pulsed faintly with a soft violet glow. Jonas didn't notice, his mind was too clouded, too hollow to recognize its significance. The fragment lay there, flickering like a dying ember, a silent whisper of a war that the universe no longer remembered. Jonas sank onto a metal bench, running his fingers over the knife's worn handle, trying to recall why he carried it. His father's blade, the symbol of a legacy lost to the void. But the memories, whatever they had been, were gone, replaced only by an aching void. Solara remained by the window, watching the storm churn in the sky, its shifting currents masking a secret they could no longer grasp. "We stopped it," Jonas murmured, his voice low, yet resolute. "No matter what we lost, humanity survives. That's what matters." Solara turned, her gaze softer than before, less guarded, almost understanding. "And so do the Valkyrie," she said quietly. But deep inside, in the spaces where memories should have been, unease coiled around their thoughts, a gnawing sensation, as if something had been stolen from them, as if the universe had erased Cynus 9, and with it, pieces of themselves. High above, the storm raged on, tendrils of lightning arced across the heavens, curling and twisting, like unseen eyes, watching, waiting. The electromagnetic storm above Cynus 9 still churned violently, crackling with arcs of emerald lightning that illuminated the lone outpost of the human alliance. Within its steel walls, Jonas Reed and Solara Varis prepared to depart. Jonas stood beside a small transport ship, his exosuit hastily patched up, though the fractures in its plating remained, silent scars of a battle no one here seemed to remember. He turned a battered knife over in his hands, the last relic of his father, but the weight of it now felt meaningless, like a lifeless scrap of metal stripped of its history. Beside him, Solara methodically wiped the bioblade clean, her violet eyes flicking across the gathered human soldiers, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and unease. Though their memories had been erased, something unseen lingered, a shadow stalking them from the edges of perception. As Jonas stepped onto the transport, his tactical wrist device flickered red. A system alert. He frowned and tapped the interface. Then came the voice, not the cold, artificial tone of an AI. This was something else, something deep and primal, a whisper that slithered into his mind like poison smoke. "Thank you for setting me free." It cooed, a chorus of countless voices layered atop one another, stretching from the abyss of time itself. "We will meet again, soon." The transmission cut, the wrist device went dark. Jonas stood frozen, his breaths, rasping through the filters of his suit, suddenly felt heavier. Slowly, he turned to Solara. "Did you hear that?" His voice was barely above a whisper. Solara didn't speak, just gave a slow, deliberate nod, her grip tightening around her blade. "It's not dead," she said, her voice like a blade unsheathed. They both looked up. The storm was different now. Its currents twisted with unnatural precision, as though responding to a presence unseen. Then, through the electric haze, something took form, a figure, faceless, towering, suspended in the air like a god unbound. Twin points of searing white light burned where its eyes should be. And the space around it, distorted, warped, like reality itself bent to accommodate its existence. Jonas's instincts screamed at him. He raised the knife, not that it would make a difference. If it escaped, his voice was low, edged with something between fury and fear. "Then we failed." Solara's gaze never wavered. "Or we just helped it begin." The faceless entity did not move. It did not advance. It simply observed, a silent proclamation of its presence. And then, it vanished. A single bolt of lightning seared the sky where it had stood. Jonas and Solara exchanged a glance. This time, there was no uncertainty. The fear had settled deeper, past flesh, past thought, not the fear of death, but the fear of what they had unleashed. "Whatever it is," Jonas said, steel in his voice, "humanity will not kneel to it. We have survived worse. We will keep fighting." For the first time, Solara smiled, not out of mockery, but out of something far rarer. "And so will the Valkyrie." They stepped onto the ship. The doors sealed shut, the engines roared to life, drowning out the distant thunder of the storm. As the vessel ascended into the cold, endless void, Jonas cast one last glance through the viewport. He did not know if the entity had truly escaped or if it had been nothing more than the last lingering illusion of Cynus 9. But one thing was certain. This war was not over. Somewhere in the infinite dark, unseen eyes still watched, waiting, and in his pocket, unnoticed, the shattered remnant of the buried city pulsed with faint, violet light, its secret kept, for now.